Almost 2.5 months ago, I planted 3 different cover crop mixes to test whether forage soybeans, Chinese red cowpeas, or red ripper cowpeas would perform better in the mix. The only thing different in those mixes was indeed the different type of annual legume that we had in that warm season mix. I'm Rob from Dowdle Family Farms, and I've been on this mission to grow more of our swine feed on our farm while also improving the land with cover crops and the swine feed that we're growing. There are 3 really unique challenges to accomplishing this goal. First, growing pigs need a lot of high quality protein, especially in amino acid forms like lysine, which are hard to get in plant-based diets. Pigs usually get them from soybean meal, and that's really a highly processed type of the soybean seed that's been heat treated to kill a lot of the anti-nutritional factors that inhibit pig growth. Also, sows in milk and younger pigs especially require feeds that have a lot less fiber, bulky lignin content, and so that's kind of hard for them to get a lot of really good nutrition that way. Third, when you start talking about annual forage legumes in Mississippi, it is hot and usually really dry. Now this year has been exceptionally wet in July, but for the most part, the heat and the dryness and the drought really require a special type of legumes, so clovers really do not work very well for us in our area. Therefore, the options in Mississippi that we have to grow are typically soybeans or cowpeas. If you live in one of the 48 states that allows you to grow sun hemp, it is not a hemp-based plant. It's from the Crotalaria species. It is an outstanding forage legume as well. However, it is not allowed to be grown in Mississippi. This is the 2nd year I've tried growing forage soybeans, and let's take a look at some of how I've incorporated them into other plots, and then we'll go take a look at the comparison plots between the Chinese red cowpeas and the red ripper cowpeas. I'm out here in the 10-acre field that we're regenerating with cover crops and livestock, and this is the first pig paddock that I had the pigs in over winter. It's later for it to be seeded, and you can tell in here that the soybeans, I had run out of cowpeas, and so I purchased some soybeans, and they're actually growing relatively well. You can see that they're about 6 inches tall at the top of the branches, and then when the leaves stick out, they're about another 3 or 4 inches tall. There's some brown top millet, buckwheat, and also some hybrid pearl millet in here as well. The thing about this that I'm discovering though, these forage soybeans are an Eagle brand soybean, and they tend to seem to grow relatively well when there's not a whole lot of competition. For example, if it's thinly seeded, they seem to be growing a little bit better. Now here, you can tell that we've had some grazing pressure from deer. It may be turkey in there, I don't know. And the deer or turkey have been grazing the buckwheat, which is pretty normal. But once you get into some of the thicker areas where the grasses and buckwheat are growing more thickly, you don't see nearly as much of the soybean growing. It seems to me that if there's much competition, that the forage soybeans are just not as aggressive as the cowpeas are, but that may just be my observation. The forage soybeans do seem to do relatively well when there's less competition, but in a competitive mix, they just don't seem to be performing quite as well as the cowpeas. Both the Chinese red and the red ripper cowpeas are much more aggressive. The honeybees are really working this buckwheat over here this morning. I don't know if you can tell, but there are probably 50 to 100 dragonflies flying around right now. I'm assuming they're capturing honeybees. I don't know what they're doing. Let's go see if we can compare the plots where we have the cowpeas and the soybeans growing together. This here is the actual test plot. It's over close to the old part of the farm where we have the sows and our breeders. This section right here is where I planted the forage soybeans. Another section next over to it is where I planted the Chinese red cowpeas. And then the farthest closer to that dirt hill over there is where I planted the Red Rippers. The forage soybeans, you can see that they're growing up in here relatively well. The soybean is this little round tipped leaf there. This is buckwheat that's gone to seed. A little bit of buckwheat that hadn't gone to seed yet. And there's not a whole lot of pearl millet growing right here in this moment. I planted this with hybrid pearl millet, buckwheat, and then at the same rate for forage soybeans and cowpeas, each of the different types of cowpeas. And there is some mass on the forage soybeans. They've actually turned out better than I anticipated them turning out. The first month they looked like they were about the same, but really they just kept lagging and lagging and lagging behind. Now they're starting to put on more bulk and more volume. I don't know how well they will regrow once I graze them with pigs. I may have to update with a video on that later. But you can tell that we're well within that 60 to 70 day mark because the buckwheat has already gone and developed a hard seed. So probably what I may wind up doing is grazing this real hard with pigs if we have some soil moisture when it's time to move the pigs in here, and then let the buckwheat regrow. We'll see. But anyway, the forage soybeans, I think they need a slightly more neutral pH in the soil, closer to 6.5 to 7. And I think that cowpeas can handle just a slightly more acidic soil, like 5.8 to 6.5. Versus like the 6.3 or 6.5 that soybeans prefer. I may be wrong on that in terms of what the soybeans need. I'm not very good with soybeans. I don't like growing soybeans though for pigs because of the different inhibiting growth factors. If the soybeans go to seed, I don't want them to, but if they do go to seed, they can actually keep pigs from growing and do some harm. There's some kind of nutritional component in there. You can tell right here on that forage soybean where it's been grazed by something, probably deer, but who knows what was actually in here eating it. Let's take a look at the Chinese red cowpeas. So this is the Chinese red cowpea. You can see actually that it's actually producing grain. One thing that I've noticed, not as much in this test crop, but one of the things that I've noticed in our cover crop mixes, I mixed both Chinese red cowpeas and I added Red Ripper cowpeas. But the Chinese red cowpeas seem to bloom a tad earlier than the Red Ripper cowpeas, and they seem to be a more bushy type variety, similar to what you'd expect if you were growing pink eye purple hulls or something along those kind of for human food. It's still great, but I think they're a slightly shorter producing cowpea, but it does make them a little bit more aggressive as well. Again, you can see the flowers blooming, and you can see peed pods as well. If I give this another month or so before putting the pigs in here, they will have a tremendous amount of protein. They're planning on farrowing mid to late August, so that may be when I move the pigs in here. When they're first in milk, that should help them out a good bit. But again, the Chinese reds seem to be a little bit more aggressive, growing right out of the gate, and they regrow really well after being grazed too. The Red Ripper cowpeas seem to vine a lot more. I don't know if you can tell, but it's like they produce a vine that grows along the ground and then straight up, so it has a much more branching type vining system, whereas the Red Ripper cowpeas are more of a single bush. So they're still blooming. I'll see them bloom from time to time. I don't see any blooms or seeds on these right here, I think the Chinese red will produce less biomass, but what they produce will be more quickly, whereas the Red Ripper cowpeas will be a longer season. Frankly, I probably won't be able to choose which of these types of cowpeas I want to grow over the other. Usually in our area, iron and clay cowpeas are the only ones we have. Iron and clay cowpeas are a great variety of cowpea if you have looking for something that's long season and that doesn't need to regrow after it's been grazed. So if I had, like in early June or even late April or early May, I could plant the iron and clay cowpeas. They produce tons of forage, and then turn the pigs on them in August or September, and they just annihilated them, and they probably produce very little seed, even here in Mississippi. I haven't grown any this year, so I can't show them to you. But here with these Chinese red and Red Ripper cowpeas, they regrow after grazing. And that's really what I'm looking for in a cowpea most of the time. If I were planting early in the year, I'd probably go for the Red Ripper cowpeas. They vine a little bit more. They do produce seed early, but they regrow after grazing, and so that'd work really well. But if I were looking more for like if I'm planting this time of the year, July or August, and looking for a cowpea to put on some weight, to provide some good nutrition for pigs before my fall cover crops, I think definitely that the Chinese reds would go a little bit faster. They would perform about as well as the Red Ripper cowpeas, but they're just a bushier type that produces a little bit more mass. Either way, the grain on the cowpeas is great for a lot of different wildlife. Turkeys seem to love them. Pigs love it. Deer, you've seen the deer eating, where the deer have grazed some of this already. So I think it's really good all around for a lot of the different wildlife species as well. So there you have it, a forage soybean versus Red Ripper cowpeas and Chinese red cowpeas. I don't think you'd be going wrong either way, in my setting anyway, with any of the cowpeas. The forage soybeans cost more money, and to be honest with you, they don't seem to get nearly as much production. After talking to Rocky Lemus, our state forage extension specialist, he has echoed also that he's had a difficult time getting forage soybeans to perform pretty well. And of course, in their trials, they follow the actual instructions and all that. I don't fertilize the way that you're supposed to and everything else. So in my setting, I'd rather have plants that are growing the way I need them to grow without having a whole lot of inputs. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this video. Take care and have a great day.